Genesis 19 relates the downfall of Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot is the nephew of Abraham, the patriarch, and he and his family have settled in the city of Sodom. But God has sent two angels to inspect the city because he wants to destroy it. But at Abraham's request, he wants to see if there are even 5 righteous people in the city that might result in the city being spared. The angels, who appear as ordinary men, and they are often just simply called men in this narrative, they arrive at Sodom, and Lot invites them to stay at his home for the night. It's a generous act that extends care and generosity to the otherwise vulnerable, or the apparently vulnerable. So at that point in the narrative, things are actually looking pretty good for Sodom. But then we pick up the narrative in verse 4. Before they, that's the angels, could get to sleep, the men of the town, the men of Sodom, from young to old, down to the last man, surrounded the house. They called out to Lot and said, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out and let us meet them." Lot went out to them at the entrance, shutting the door behind him. He said, "Don't be so evil, my brothers. Look, I have 2 daughters who have never known a man. Let me bring them out to you and do to them as you see fit. Just don't do this thing to these men because they've come under the protection of my roof." They said, "Get out of the way." And then they said, "This guy came here as a migrant and he keeps trying to be judge. Now we'll harm you more than them." They pressured the man Lot greatly and were about to break down the door. But the men, that's the angels, inside, reached out, pulled Lot inside and shut the door. The men who were at the door of the house, they struck and stunned, from young to old, so that they struggled to find the door. At this point in the narrative, Lot looks like prime candidate for worst father of the year. As a father of 2 daughters, I want to shake him and just say, what on earth are you thinking here? He's willing to give his 2 daughters to a pack of would-be rapists. Now, the narrative doesn't defend or praise Lot for this. In fact, I put it to you that the narrative is designed to make us recoil with disgust at the suggestion. It's also meant to highlight the dire circumstances that Lot finds him in. Someone is about to get hurt. Either it's going to be the 2 men, the angels, or it's going to be Lot's 2 daughters, or it's going to be Lot himself, or all of the above. So Lot is in a very highly pressured situation. He's under duress here. Now, that's not to excuse what he says for his suggested course of action. It's merely to highlight the depravity of the mob that he's confronting. But the way that the narrative gets us to think this is actually ingenious. The narrative has actually fooled us into thinking that Lot is as degenerate as the mob at his door, because he seems willing to allow the pack rape of his daughters. But the narrative doesn't stop there. It continues. Then the men said to Lot, this is the angels now speaking to him, "Do you have anyone else here, a son-in-law or your sons or daughters, anyone else in the town who belongs to you? Get them out of this place because we are about to destroy this place. Since the outcry against them is so great before Yahweh, he has sent us to destroy it." So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law who were married to his daughters. He said, "Get up, get out of this place because Yahweh is about to destroy the town." But his sons-in-law thought he was joking. As darkness lifted, the angels urged Lot, "Get up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who've been found, or you'll be wiped out in the town's guilt." But he hesitated. So the men grabbed him by the arm, his wife by the arm, and his 2 daughters by the arm because of Yahweh's sympathy for him. And they took him and left him outside the town. Now as they brought them out, they said, "Run for your lives. Don't look back." Sodom and Gomorrah are then destroyed. The narrative reveals here that Lot's daughters were not actually in the house, and nor had they never known a man, as Lot said. In fact, both of them were married. and they were actually elsewhere. Lot has to go out of his house to his sons-in-law, presumably where his daughters also are. And these sons-in-law, the text tells us, are married to his daughters. Unfortunately, our English versions largely let us down here by characterising Lot's sons-in-law as pledged to be married to his daughters. But folks, that's definitely not what the text says. It's very clear that these men are sons-in-law and that they were married to his daughters. The NIV 11 has a footnote that suggests this other translation, but because that's actually what the text says. But unfortunately, our translators, I think largely like most of us, have been fooled by the narrative so masterfully into thinking that Lot's daughters are actually just inside the door. But as the narrative very plainly goes on to state, Lot's daughters are married and they're elsewhere. And then eventually they are found, they are brought back to the house. Now that changes the scene remarkably. We discover now, after the fact, that Lot's apparently degenerate suggestion of offering his two daughters for pack rape was actually a ruse. Presumably under duress, he was aiming to forestall the mob, offering a decoy, as it were, which he thinks the mob might fall for. And then perhaps he might try to smuggle his two guests out of town. As it turns out, they smuggle him out of town. The story takes a dramatic turn. Tension escalates there as Lot makes the suggestion because the mob then threatens Lot. But then the angels smuggle Lot and his wife and his two daughters who have been found out of the town. It is a massive reversal. The whole situation is just turned on its head. And we as readers experience a total reversal in our understanding of the narrative at this point too. So our translators, unfortunately, haven't really helped us here. The narrative doesn't end up advocating rape. It doesn't think that pack rape of men is terrible while pack rape of women is fine. Lot is not the degenerate father we initially think. On the contrary, the narrative omits critical information at a critical moment. And then before it reveals this critical information to us, the narrative uses our revulsion at rape to evoke a particular response in us as readers, and then it uses that response as a mechanism to surprise us when the information is made known to us. And we as readers, along with most of the characters here, undergo a massive reversal. It's one of the most skillful examples of detail omission in a biblical narrative.